welcome to our show where we seek to inform and discuss topics such as nutrition and behavior. I'm your host, Terry Perkins, and our expert for the show is Mr. Craig Gordon. He has over 44 years of experience in biochemistry, addiction, behavior, and disease. He also runs an organization called NEAD, which stands for Nutrition and Exercise versus Addiction and Disease. So Craig, our topic today is alcohol, the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's get into it.
Actually, that's incorrect. The ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing is sugar. Alcohol's right behind it because alcohol is basically magnified sugar. Wine and beer is fermented sugar. And the public doesn't have any idea that drunk is deep sugar shock. And
yeah, so let's get into our first sign on that. So I think that's what, number 109?
So this is something that I learned from a government biochemist literally 40 years ago, that alcohol is magnified sugar. So that's the distillation process. And then wine and beer is fermented sugar, and drunk is deep sugar shock. And the sign says, watch out for diabetes, because a lot of people drink themselves into diabetes. So we're looking at all sorts of different types of things that go on that people don't understand. They think alcoholism and the effects of it actually feel good and they deserve it, when in actuality they're in shock and it causes disease and mental health issues and really bad behavior, and a lot of liability and risk, and people think, oh, I deserve it. I've been a good boy or a good girl. I can have a few drinks, no problem.
Right.
And so,
I even think about how it's such a common pastime. You could drink at movie theaters. People drink on the beach. People drink everywhere. You know, you drink with your family. It's just
drink and drive.
Shouldn't, but that does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's more common than houseflies.
Yeah.
It goes back to, the beginning of civilization. It actually predates sugar. The actual sugar, because they were fermenting vegetables and fruits and winding up with alcohol, and it was before they made sugar.
Wow.
They figured that out, 500 years ago.
Right.
And so forth.
So let's get more into the history and the financial aspect of that.
Well, alcoholism, in my opinion, costs our country $1 trillion a year.
Wow.
The CDC and the NIH and other organizations would say it's $500 billion, 500, 600, 700 trillion or billion. I think it's a good trillion, if not more.
Wow.
And sabotages so much potential in our country. The best and the brightest are almost always drinking. A ton of influence with money and moneyed people think that it's absolutely normal. Who knows how many millions of people make their living from alcohol and the distribution of it.
Right.
And so it's just so ingrained and sewn into the fabric of our society. And that's one of the reasons, we're in such trouble. And we have so much diabetes.
Right.
And, amongst other things.
So why do you think that is? Why is it so ingrained?
Well, because it's easy, it's cheap, it's an addiction, it's something that we are born and raised to associate with pain and pleasure and reward, just like sugar, as normal. And we think we deserve it, and so there you go. What else are you going to do, when you go to the ball game, or what else are you going to do when you go out on a date or out socializing?
Right.
It's social lubricant. It's, it's just a normal thing. But the consequences aren't so normal.
So before we get into the consequences, let's get into our next slide, which is number 49, and I feel like that also talks about why it's so prevalent in our society.
If your food is polluted and dead, guess what?
Yeah, there should be slide 49, but that one kind of goes into the family history aspect of alcohol. Could you talk on that as well?
Well, that one refers to all the different things that set us up to be a little bit weaker mentally and think that alcohol is your friend when it is not, and then you get in trouble with it. It's, a very slippery slope, and people think it's normal, and here we go again. So, what do we got here?
Right. So I guess we can move on to that 211 now.
So here's one of the things that sets the stage. Please don't love your grandkids with sugar. And we all got it. I'm 66. We got loads of sugar. No clue, not a mention of it, no idea. And, all of our relatives, they weren't alcoholics, they were heavy drinkers. It was normal. You can't fly on one wing. You've got, we're, belly up to the bar, as our parents used to say. And they say, I'll have an old-fashioned. An old-fashioned is like a sugar bomb. It's got sugar added to it. It's got 2 different kinds of liquor. And you have a couple of those, and you're literally starting to orbit the moon. And you don't know any better. And that's what normal was back when. So, the whole thing starts when you're a little kid and you're starting to eat a lot of sugar. And you think it's a treat. So.
Right. And even so, the slide that came up flipped, the 211 one, that one talked about the food that we eat. Can you talk about the correlation there? Because somebody might not say, well, how does me having a sweet tooth over here correlate to me drinking alcohol?
Well, look at the biochemistry of it. You've got sugar, and then you've got fermented sugar.
Okay.
You've got sugar and then magnified sugar. So the next slide talks about it's a short hop from starch and sugar to alcohol and drugs. So you're 12 years old.
Okay.
You get home from school. What are you going to hammer on? Something with either carbs or sugar in it. So you're 14. What are you going to do when you get home? More carbs and sugar. For years, if you behave yourself, you get dessert. If you finish your meal, you get your dessert.
That's
if you
true.
do what you're supposed to do, you get a treat. It's always sugar, sugar, and more sugar. Go to a bank, go to a barber shop, sugar and more sugar. And then, it's even in church. You go to, after church, it's coffee and cookies and donuts.
Right.
More sugar, more stimuli. And so, this is such a given thing. Everybody loves you with sugar when you're a little kid.
Right.
It's like, oh my God. So maybe that's why we're having so many problems, and all these problems have come home to roost. And we've got an absolute epidemic of mental health issues, addiction, crime, disease, and all these things are now, which are preventable, come up, and they're all cumulative and progressive, and now we're in a lot of trouble. And now we have to fish or cut bait. Now we have to get something done. Now we have to take this seriously, and if we don't start taking it seriously, we're done. Because we won't have the money or the time or the staff or personnel to address all these issues. It's already at a critical stage now.
Before we move on to the serious dangers and the direction that we're heading, I want to make sure we get to slide 75, and I don't think we did, but.
So if we take care of our kids and we make sure they eat better, they hydrate properly, they get exercise and so forth, and vitamins, then we're actually putting teeth in prevention. We're helping those kids of various ages be smarter, build their capacity, have more common sense, have more patience. Maybe they're a little less, obsessive compulsive, or a little less, knee-jerk reaction to everything around them. And they're hungry. They're trying to learn. They're trying to process. They're trying to have fun. They're trying to keep up with the Joneses in their way and keep up with their neighbors. It's very competitive out there, and so we need to take more time. Need to take more downtime to focus on nutrition.
All right, so let's now move into more into, you call alcoholism progressive, cumulative, and subtle. So why would you say that?
Well, it's almost a natural progression in a perverted way. When your body acclimates to mountains of sugar and junk food and chemicals over years and years and years, you could probably fill up 3 55-gallon drums full of chemicals. You could probably go way up here with a small mountain of sugar and carbs. You could fill up the whole room with all the bread and the pasta and the mac and cheese. And your body is now acclimated to all these perverted sources of energy. So what's going to happen when you're 14, 16, and 18? Your body is looking for more glucose and sugar from a perverted source, rather than you eating healthy and getting your energy from a natural source slowly. You're bypassing digestion, eating and drinking a lot of unfortunate garbage.
Right.
And then you wind up in trouble and you wonder why. And nobody seems to understand it's the food, it's the drinks, it's the unhealthy activities, it's the sugar and the cigarettes. It's it could be prescription drugs that aren't good for you. We have to be food detectives. We have to understand this stuff. We have to take it seriously. So, till we do, forget about it. Why do people have to wait till they're sick as dogs to finally go, oh, if they're lucky, somebody in social services, somebody in mainstream medicine, somebody at your doctor's office, a nurse, somebody says, maybe it's your diet. So there's a study done. There's a guy, a doctor, that did years of work, and he put together a study in 1910 after doing 30 years worth of work on how sugar and carbohydrates affect behavior and disease. This is 113 or 14 years ago. Right. I didn't just make this up.
This didn't come out of my pocket, on weekends and holidays the last couple of years. I've been doing this for 45 years.
Right.
I mean, this is like every day. I see more things. I get more responses. I get more concurrence from professionals. I get out in front of people and they go, holy crap, pardon my French. They're like, you're kidding me. No, that's what people say. That's what the consensus is. That's what the concurrence is. There is serious amounts, almost darn close to 100% agreement. But do they do anything different? That's the tough part. It's like Winston Churchill said about action and inaction. He's more concerned with the inaction than the action.
Right.
So there's the letter I wrote to the governor of the state of New York years ago was about how their addiction services and this whole thing was passive inaction. So we need to take a bull by the horns and start getting serious and take some responsibility, show some leadership, show some, common sense, and get serious about this. So alcoholism is more of a blood sugar disorder, a sensitivity, or an allergy. And it takes time, and people react differently to it. It's progressive, it's cumulative. It starts when we're born in this country. And then you set the stage with a poor diet, which is normal, which is 95% of the public. And then you wind up, wanting to drink a little more than you should, and then you get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. So another point that I wanted to make sure we get to, you said sugar leads to alcohol, which could lead to many wasted years, which could lead to being hard to treat, suffering from hypoglycemia, and you don't know it, and then also diabetes. So I don't know if you wanted to go into that, because I know that's definitely...
Do we have a sign on that?
I don't believe we have a sign, but that is something that I know you wanted to hit.
Well, there's sign number 82.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. Addiction-wise, 1 out of 10 that need help get help. 1 out of 10 that get help get handled long-term. So we're looking at 1 out of 100 people that need help that get handled permanently. That's terrible. That's 1% of the people out there that need help get handled. How well is that working? Why don't I be generous? Why don't I say 5%? Still terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 5 times better than what I think it is. And so, the story is that if you don't get help, you don't get healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about it.
Right. So I guess moving on to that next point, we already saw the slide for it, but treatment issues, what are the current measures that people use to treat alcoholism? And what's wrong with it? And
Well, I don't want to make people wrong. Treatment, I hope, is ethical. Oftentimes it is not. It's about the money.
Okay.
And it's about keeping people manageable under their roof and reducing liability. And then there's a lot of psych meds in the situation, because there's dual diagnosis where
right.
people have mental disorders along with their alcohol and drug issues. And so the psych drugs complicate things. And now we have nutritional psychiatrists that help people with nutrition, exercise, and vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of lots of talk therapy and psych drugs. The psych drugs are in many times very difficult on your brain and your body. And you become addicted to some of those, and it's troublesome.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing boils down to get somebody that knows what they're talking about nutritionally to help begin to address psych issues, mental health issues, and addictions early on. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so you spoke a little bit about mental health. Let's look at the downstream consequences, mental health and metabolic syndromes. And then we have a slide on that one as well. That's number 312.
So this one refers to metabolic syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have 2 or more out of the following: smoking, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, obesity, smoking, I said smoking, and sedentary.
Mm-hmm.
Because now sedentary is just as bad as smoking.
Mm.
So if you're not getting exercise and moving your body every day, it's as bad as smoking.
Wow.
So obviously carrying the weight is a disaster, and it's far worse than people think. And it sets the stage for all sorts of troublesome consequences. And so that's metabolic syndrome. That's literally half or more of all adults have metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is like 2 inches away from chronic disease. And these are preventable chronic diseases. We don't have to volunteer to invite them into our lives. And so, you don't pay attention. You do the soldier of a convenience routine. You don't get enough exercise. You don't eat well. You don't exercise. You're in trouble.
Right.
Don't expect much. It just isn't going to happen. We have to participate. We have to, it's like put up or shut up. If you.
Right. So let's get into the next slide. That's 311.
So 75 million, I think it's higher, more like 100 million, have metabolic syndrome. 66 million people, and this was a 6-year-old number, so I think that's more like 85 million people. Binge drink at least once a month.
Wow.
Binge drink means drink to get drunk.
And that's from 2011 that you did this.
That's
sign.
an old statistic, that number.
Wow. So it's definitely higher.
It's way higher because of COVID. Like all the bad statistics doubled in COVID. Could I have that sign back again for a moment? And then 70 plus million people use psych drugs. Do you have any idea how much trouble that causes? More than you think. People think that subdues their issues. Oftentimes it doesn't. It just causes more issues, because there are side effects. Now, Barbara, the one that wrote this book about food and behavior, used to call them, they weren't side effects, they were main effects. That's serious. These are serious issues that haunt your life. And do you need to be playing whack-a-mole with all these different symptoms? So
our next slide is number 82, and that one it's talking about hypoglycemia, that list.
So these are the 9 most prevalent symptoms that the public seem to think is normal: exhaustion, depression, anxiety, insomnia, irritability, nervousness, constant worrying, headaches, insomnia, and the list goes on from there. There's a list of probably 100 different symptoms. And these are things that people that aren't taking care of themselves, which is most of the population, especially alcohol, drugs, and so forth, suffer from, and they don't know it.
Right.
So they wonder why they're not getting the sleep they need. They wonder why they can't sit still. They wonder why they can't read a book. They wonder why they can't, function in school.
Right.
They wonder why the programs aren't working so well. So
Right.
it goes on and on.
Yeah. So to move on to our next slide, that's number 388, and that one kind of covers DUI and MAD education.
So you know what DUIs are: driving under the influence. That could be marijuana as well.
Yeah.
And they're going to be testing for that shortly.
Good.
And then MAD, and I suggested to MAD, the people that run MAD, that they give a half an hour out of the 3 hours that you're mandated to do by the court to attend a MAD meeting, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to educate yourself about the consequences, that maybe we should have an explainer on the biochemistry of alcoholism and how it really hits you and hurts you. So that was an interesting possibility that I tried and couldn't seem to get it done.
Okay.
Someday.
And our next slide, we have 2 more, the next one is 74, and that one talks about prevention.
So effectively prevent A and D later, meaning alcohol and drugs, by getting kids healthy now. So how nice and simple is that? Work the kids out, get them the healthy food, get rid of the garbage, do not be a soldier of convenience, teach the kids how to cook, teach the kids how to prep food and help you as a mom or a dad cook food and prepare food, so that it's a family thing, and it's easier. Everybody participates. That's all.
Right.
Simple.
And our final slide is number 96. So move on to that one as well.
Your body is the great scorekeeper. So if you don't do the right thing for your body, you're going to get in trouble. It remembers everything on a cellular level, good and bad. Mm-hmm. So simple as that. It keeps score. You would never think of that, but that's the reality.
Right. So let's quickly go over what we learned today with alcoholism. Let's start with our first slide.
Wine and beer is fermented sugar. Alcohol is magnified sugar. Drunk is deep sugar shock. And watch out for diabetes. You can drink yourself and also smoke yourself into diabetes or diabesity.
Okay, next slide.
If your food is pollutant dead, guess what? Self-evident. Here we go again. We're all volunteers. Mm-hmm. If you want to eat the stuff that's half dead and polluted with chemicals, that's your choice.
Next slide.
Please don't love your grandkids with sugar. How obvious is that nowadays? Not 30 years ago, not 10 years ago. Now it should be. It still really isn't happening, but it's pretty obvious when you bring it up and you think about it. Mm-hmm. So.
Next slide.
So the kids, say these are my 2 feet. They're eating a lot of junk food and sugar. They go from, boom, 2 inches to the right, now it's beer and cigarettes. So we don't need to set that stage. We can change the outcomes and so forth. You don't have to participate in that perverted progression.
Mm-hmm. Next slide.
Healthy kids don't choose drugs and alcohol. Very simple.
Okay, next one.
1 out of 10 that need help ever get any help, and 1 out of 10 that get help get long-term clean and sober. Okay. So we need to change those statistics and get people healthy.
Okay, next slide.
The metabolic syndrome, which is more common than houseflies, can change if we want to start to participate in our health. This is a daily thing. We need to be committed and determined to get more healthy and be good examples.
Okay. I think for the next slides, we'll just have them play as we close up because I want to make sure that we plug in NEAD USA. Okay. So tell us a bit more about NEAD USA as the slides go on as you're talking.
So NEAD is offering, obviously speaking engagements. I have books, I have tapes, I have guidelines for nutritional behavior, or the nutritional guidelines for correcting behavior. I have 400 signs in my catalog. We can bring this to schools, we can bring it to prisons, rehabs, public health, all sorts of entities, all sorts of social services and nonprofits that could benefit from using this material in their programs to spark up and make more easy and make more real the relationship between exercise and nutrition and behavior.
Okay. Well, definitely check out needusa.org, if I'm correct. And also check out our next episode, which is going to be specifically on nutrition. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Take care.